My blog is called Michelle's Mission. I started my blog a year ago, and it is about having my life with having a learning disability. I feature disability articles. I write a lot of metaphors of comparing my disability to nature. I also have photographs. That's another passion of mine. I love photography, especially nature photography. And sometimes I feel like with having the disability, I'm able to capture details a lot of people miss, especially since I can't drive. I'll take a lot of walks if I can't get a ride somewhere, and I'll find a flower or I'll see a butterfly. And that's not something that somebody can take while they're driving a car. So I have some of my photography that's on there. And the blog it's for anybody, but I really try to put that out there for people that have disabilities, because that's part of my mission, is to encourage people that have disabilities to go out there and achieve their dreams. It's to empower them, but it's also to educate. And that education just isn't for people that have disabilities, but also people who don't have a disability, and to try to get the word out on what having my type of learning disability is.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. So glad to have you back. I was just mentioning to my guest today that she has been the fastest to go through meeting with me the first time and hitting record than I've ever had. So, Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Oh,
congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Definitely.
You're so efficient. I'm so happy to have you here today. It's great.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here today.
You doing good? You doing good?
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Michelle, can you tell everybody where you are in this great world?
Sure. I live in Pennsylvania in the United States.
What do you love the most? For anybody who's not been there yet, what do you love the most about Pennsylvania? What's a must-see, must-do thing about Pennsylvania?
Well, Pennsylvania is really nice in the fall definitely with all the leaves. That's always a nice thing. And our summers, when the weather cooperates, really nice with the different kind of flowers and just that sort of thing, which I love to photograph. We also have the benefit of having 4 seasons, so we'll have spring, summer, fall, and winter. And so, yeah, that's
lots of history too,
definitely.
Which I love.
Yeah, lots of history.
Yeah, I'm a history buff, so I love going and going and visiting places and hearing the story behind it. So, very nice. Thank you so much for being here. We have 4 seasons in Canada as well. Yep. One of them we would love to give away because it's just nasty cold, but yeah, I can identify. I love having all 4 seasons. It's great.
Right.
Definitely. I really enjoy that. So, Michelle, we got together to chat. Again, you're the fastest person to go through and get to recording. Again, I'm amazed. We chatted together about the fact that you have a blog and you have a unique story to share with everyone, a little bit about your journey. Can you kind of bring our listeners up to kind of our conversation about a little bit about your background? And,
sure.
So they understand what you're all about and what your message is.
Well, I have a learning disability, and I was diagnosed whenever I was in kindergarten with having a math. Well, at that time, it was an umbrella term for learning disability, but I struggle more with math and hand coordination and visual perception. We've come to find out that I have the technical term is dyscalculia or dyscalculia, depending on how you pronounce it. And that's the math disability. And when a lot of people think about learning disabilities, they don't think in terms of math. They automatically think it's reading based. And I'm a pretty good reader, so I don't really struggle with that as much. but it's more the math, the eye-hand coordination, and the visual perception. And shortly after my kindergarten diagnosis, I began to receive specialty services and accommodations to help me be able to be successful in school. And that was something that, was really key for me too. Having that, I had extended test time, and I also had the test read aloud to me. Those were the initial accommodations that I received. And specialty instruction was also a really important thing in the beginning.
Okay, so for people that are listening, Michelle, I would love for them to understand a little bit more. As an adult looking back now, do you see things that you can identify as, okay, now I understand what this means as an adult?
Definitely.
Compared to when you were young?
Right.
Because I seems hard.
Definitely.
Right?
It is hard. One of the things I can really look back on, and I see the reason why. I have hand dexterity issues. And when I was in school, everyone just said, "Oh, you have really bad handwriting." And even some of the people, the teachers that I worked with, were not always really positive with the handwriting. I had people who told me, "Well, if you want to be a writer, you better learn how to write neat." And I even had a teacher that put a W indicating weakness on my report card, knowing I had a disability. And once I learned how to type, that really made the difference. But as an adult, one of the evaluations I had, they said, "Oh, you have really weak hand dexterity. You have this." And then I'm like, "Oh, that makes sense why things will fall out of my hands, or why it can be really difficult for me to be able to use them to write, or to be able to use them to unlock doors or things." That was something that made a lot of sense. Another thing that made more sense too was I would also flinch at objects. And we always knew the visual perception was going to be another issue. And it's not with my eyes, it's with my brain. And that came as a thing with driving. And that my parents wanted me to wait to get my license, because we knew that I really struggled with eye-hand coordination, with the ball flinching at me whenever I was in gym class when I was a little kid.
Okay.
Yeah, and just not being able to really do competitive sports because I was really uncoordinated. And then when they said, "Oh, yeah, you have visual perception, depth perception, it's not, going to be possible for you to get your license," I'm like, okay, that made a lot of sense looking back at that. But my main struggle was always math. That seemed to be the big thing that always gave me a lot of problems, from counting to just not knowing how numbers work. So I can look back and say, yeah, that was just something that we knew about, but just to get that term, it made a lot more sense as I became an adult. I mean, it was pretty evident. I wasn't going to know how to read the face of a clock. You got a kid and you've done countless interventions with that, and they still can't do a whole lot of that. That's a lot of the disability. And we tried a lot of basic classes for math, and I never really got further than just knowing the basic stuff.
Okay, so I'm fascinated by this, Michelle, because there's probably students or adults looking back at when they were students who are like, this sounds like me. Like when you're talking, this sounds like, and I'm 52. So when I'm growing up, when I'm younger, when I'm in public school and elementary school, I can remember students who struggled with things, and they were just either given, extra help, or they fell behind, but people didn't know what they didn't know. Right. As teachers, and these kids would just fall behind or struggle, or other kids would not be so gracious and kind with them, and as a child, anytime that you felt that you were different than others or struggled, then that made life very difficult. Is that kind of how you felt growing up as
Oh,
well?
I did, definitely. I was very lucky to get the help that I did receive.
Yeah.
Um, this was even at the time, being in the 80s, it still wasn't like it is today, where they're able to diagnose even sometimes before the kid even goes into school. They'll have a lot of early
Wow.
intervention programs and specialty preschools. So I did have a preschool teacher that thought something was going on, but yeah, I was my first kid, my parents' first child. So they really didn't
Hmm.
know a lot what to base it on. So I was very lucky to have that diagnosis. However, I went to very small school district where you couldn't really blend in, you couldn't hide, and there wasn't a lot of diversity. So uh, if you weren't a part of that, whatever mold they wanted you to fit into, you
Yeah.
didn't really fit in.
Yeah.
And people knew that I went to the learning support classroom, especially once I was able to be in regular science and social studies with my general ed peers. I would still have to go to the learning support room to get a test read to me. And I always had the specialty instruction for math. So it did make me stick out a lot different. And a lot of times people would say, wow, you're so lucky. You get to do easy work in that room. Well,
Oh,
for
wow.
me, I can understand. I mean, someone looking at that might think that doing an elementary school page when you're older is really easy. But for me, that was a real challenge. And people would say, well, you're getting the answers to the test. And we didn't get the answers read. We didn't get any answers. We were just
No.
had it read to us often. I would always say, well, I'm a good reader. Well, yeah, you can be a good reader, but sometimes it makes more sense to have it read aloud. And just having that extra time gave my brain the chance to process it. But there was a lot of misconceptions that everybody else was working hard and somehow I wasn't. And that just was the total opposite.
I'm so glad to hear you say that you had support growing up.
Yes.
Um, so, as an adult looking back, what would be your message to a parent or a student who finds themselves today in a place where they're struggling in an area like this? From your perspective, I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Right. I think for a parent, it's not to give up on your child and to work with them and to work with the school collaboratively. So if you got a child that's in there, just having that open and honest dialogue of what is going on, what you're noticing, being open to what the school's noticing, and to advocate for your child. That's something my parents always did. They went to all my individual education plan meetings. Uh, they advocated. When I was in school, we didn't go to students didn't go to their own IEP meetings. Now we see a lot of students who do that. So my mom and dad would say, well, we're going to your meeting. Is there anything you want to talk about? And there would be a lot of times I'd have things that I would want to say, and my parents would go and they would talk, that they would advocate for me at the meeting, and they would get back to me on what the plan was. So I think that's really important for a parent. And they also spend a lot of time studying with me and just encouraging me and definitely explaining what my disability was in simple age appropriate terms. I think that's important. A child needs to know what disability they have and what they need to do to help themselves as well. And my advice for a child that is in school is not to give up, because things do get easier. I can remember being that kid thinking, wow, learning is really hard. And the rest of my life, I'm just not going to be successful and it's always going to be difficult. And what I found is I found some things I like to do and I was good at, like reading and writing. Those were things I could do. And focusing on those was more empowering. And slowly, my grades did improve. And I was able to have success in school. And as an adult, I'm able to make those decisions for myself. And just, it's a much better life than I thought it was going to be. So,
Nice.
Yeah, definitely.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Michelle. Okay, so you're a blog writer.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about when you started writing your blog,
Mhm.
and maybe a little bit about who this blog is for.
Okay. My blog is called Michelle's Mission. I started my blog a year ago, and it is about having my life with having a learning disability. I feature disability articles. I write a lot of metaphors of comparing my disability to nature. I also have photographs. That's another passion of mine. I love photography, especially nature photography, and I feel like with having the disability, I'm able to capture details a lot of people miss, especially since I can't drive. I'll take a lot of walks if I can't get a ride somewhere, and I'll find a flower or I'll see a butterfly. And that's not something that somebody can take while they're driving a car. So I have some of my photography that's on there. And the blog is it's for anybody, but I really try to put that out there for people that have disabilities, because that's part of my mission is to encourage people that have disabilities to go out there and achieve their dreams. It's to empower them, but it's also to educate. And that education just isn't for people that have disabilities, but also people who don't have a disability, and to try to get the word out on what having my type of learning disability is.
Okay, so Michelle, there's people we come across in our lives, in our family, and our friends who have a physical disability that's visual.
Yes.
You can see
Mm-hmm.
that, for example, maybe they can't walk, or there's different things that are obvious to sight when you look and you interact with somebody and you're like, I can identify this person
Yeah.
has a disability. And that's great, because then in a way, then as community members, we can kind of help and be an ally. And,
Mm-hmm.
but when your disability is not visually apparent, how I think that sometimes maybe people might misread or misunderstand, or maybe just do the wrong thing out of ignorance.
Oh,
Is that something you
oh yeah,
experience? Or
definitely. A lot of
okay,
people, when they find out I have a disability, because you can't see it, they don't think it's there. I'll have somebody will say, "Well, you don't look like you're disabled." I'm like, well, some people,
what does that
yeah,
mean, right? Yeah, yeah,
exactly. And they're
yeah.
usually looking for the cane or a walker or a wheelchair.
Okay, yeah.
And I have to patiently explain that some people have disabilities you can see, and other people have disabilities that you can't. I also get people that'll tell me, well, especially people that know me and don't really understand a lot of the disability. Well, you can't be disabled because you have your bachelor's degree, or you can't have
Wow.
or you can't have a math disability because you were able to figure out that very basic math skill. And like, well, I still do have a disability. This isn't something that I'm able to overcome. I've been able to achieve a lot, but it's not that I overcame the disability. I found a way around being able to do that.
From your perspective, Michelle, speaking just as you, not for everyone else, do you find it harder to work through your disability being that it's not visual, like people can't see it? Or do you think it's, in a sense, easier for you to work with throughout your disability, in the fact that people can't see visually what's
Right.
like something that's identifiable as a disability, quote, quote?
Right. Sometimes it depends on the situation. If I
Okay.
go
All right.
into a job interview, a lot of times the employer won't be able to see the disability. So I can kind of not say that I have that. I have to, but then it can also be harder when you go into a job situation and you say, I need an accommodation. And then people are like, oh, well, we don't see that. So there are some advantages. I'm able to
Okay.
sometimes be able to go into situations and not have that outright discrimination. That can be a little easier to work through, but it can be harder when I have difficulties and people don't understand it.
Michelle, as I'm talking to you today, I want you to know,
Mhm.
first of all, that in my own life with one of my kids, they've struggled their entire life. And listening to you, I'm hearing things that I've heard my son say to me
Mhm.
from his perspective of the struggles that he's faced
Right,
through school, and listening to you, I'm thinking, my goodness, there's some things that are checking boxes in my head of his struggle. And like he had a development plan, an
hmm
individual education plan. He had accommodations in school,
hmm
but I'm listening to you, Michelle. There's something deeper, I think, for my own son listening to you. So you're helping me right now, just thinking of my
Oh,
son. So thank you for that. First of all,
thank
um,
you.
how what is your hope in doing Michelle's mission? What is your hope in getting on a podcast and sharing your story? What are you hoping for people who interact with you? What do you want them to know?
What I want people to know is that, learning disabilities are real, and there are people that have disabilities that we can't see, but there's so much more to me than just having a disability too. And
Yeah.
there's things that I can do and that I like to do. And I want to encourage other people that have disabilities to be able to go out and do what they want to do and to be able to find a way. Because I know I've had a lot of people that have told me, well, you can't go to college because of your math disability, or you'll have limited job choices. I even had a psychiatrist that said, you're probably not going to go beyond community college. And I think it's just listening to the person and giving them the supports that they need, and the encouragement and just the understanding.
So tell us a little bit more about your journey then, like through education.
Right.
You went on, you've studied, you've got your degree. Tell me a little bit about that process when some people, like you mentioned, were saying it's not going to be possible, and you just went and did it.
Right.
What did that mean to you going through the process and then receiving your degree?
Well, to go through the process, it was rather difficult because I knew that there was things that I knew I always wanted to do. And I was
Yeah.
really afraid because I knew I was having all the supports when I was in school. And uh, a lot of times when people would talk about the real world, it was really scary for me to be able to do that. So I already had that fear. I already had that understanding it was going to be difficult. But I can remember it really started that last years in high school. I remember when I was, you know, we were trying to figure out what I was going to do after. And I had a teacher that said, I don't think you can do college because of your math difficulty. Why don't we get you into vocational school? And I thought, well, that's nice. If that, I think they have wonderful programming, but nothing there interested me. So I had to kind of be independent at that age and tell the teacher and a lot of other students that had disabilities. My classmates were going there, and they didn't really understand what I was doing. So that took a lot of, just that encouragement. And I did find it. There was a student teacher that was at the university, and I remember her telling me, you can go to college. I remember looking at her like, well, what do you mean I can go to college? I thought that was for smart people. I didn't think that was a possibility for me. And she said, well, there's students with disabilities that are on campus. They're taking their remedial classes and they're doing fine. And I just remember that encouragement. And then in the United States, we have Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And what they do is they provide through a Voc Rehab Act, they provide funds for people with disabilities to go to college. They provide accommodation. They help you with all their services are free. Their testing is free,
Nice,
job
nice.
placement, things like that. And I remember meeting with one of them, and I said, "Well, I want to go to college, but we didn't take SATs. I'm not a great test taker." And he said, "Well, a lot of universities look at how well you did at a community college." So we had all the plan set up. I found a program that interested me, and they had disability accommodations, and I had to get tested again for having a learning disability. And right before that, when I got tested, I can remember the psychiatrist put on my evaluation, most likely won't go beyond a community college. And that really hurt. That really stung. I mean, that wasn't a great pep talk or encouragement for somebody who's just beginning. And I even had professors who told me, well, you're going to have really limited job choices because of your math problems. And because of that stigma and because of everything that was told, I didn't get a lot of those accommodations in the beginning. And my grades really suffered. And it wasn't until I had an encouraging professor, I was struggling in her class, and she said, why don't we at least get you extended test time? And I got through her class. I didn't do great, but we got through the class, and I was able to graduate and got my associate's degree. I able to move out on my own. I worked in some centers with kids. I really enjoyed it, but there was always that longing for something more for myself. So for financial reasons, I had to move back in with my mom and my dad, and my job downsized. And I thought, this is really a good time to go back to school. And during that time, when I went back to school, I wasn't working. So school was my full-time job. And I used all the accommodations. I did extended test time, a note taker, and I also advocated for myself. And I wasn't hiding that I had a disability. I talked to my professors and for most of my classes, and I was successful with that. Most of them were really understanding. There was maybe one or two that didn't quite get it, but we were able to work through the class and be able to pass and do well. And my grades really improved. And I was able to graduate with a bachelor's degree, despite what I was told years ago I couldn't do. But a lot of it was finding the right program. I knew anything with a lot of math or a lot of science, that was not going to be beneficial. It took a while after I graduated with the bachelor's degree to find the job that was the right place. A lot of employers weren't very understanding. And now I work in a school with kids that have disabilities and some who don't. Some just need that extra reinforcement. And it's just amazing they come full circle. And I get to read a test to a student that needs to have that, or I get to work with somebody that, And the blog, like I said, started about a year ago. I remember I had a friend who told me, you really should write about your disability. And I remember her telling me this in the beginning. And I said, I really don't want to do that. I just kind of want to go away and pretend like it's not there. But once I got my first article published on the Mighty back even before the blog, it was so healing to have that out there. And I began to connect with other people that had disabilities, and just having that connection that made me feel like I wasn't alone, and it was healing for me. And other people, they claim that that's healing for them.
So while you're chatting, I'm going through your photos on your website, by the way, on your blog. So I'm seeing the flowers. I'm seeing just gorgeous photos, beautiful stuff. And I'm seeing butterflies.
Yes.
Can you tell me what the significance of a butterfly is to you? Because I'm thinking in my mind as you're speaking, there's a parallel here.
Definitely.
Of change and transformation. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Yes, exactly. And it's, definitely the change and the transformation. In fact, I am starting to write a book called Chasing Butterflies, because it felt like a lot of times when I was young, just all my dreams felt like I was running and chasing them, and they just didn't seem to really work out. And I always loved butterflies. So whenever I try to take a picture of a butterfly, I do get pictures of them, and they work out wonderful. Yeah. But sometimes they can fly around, and sometimes they can be hard to catch. But when they land on your shoulder or they land on your hand or you get that picture, there's so much beauty in that. And there's been a transformation. We've had butterfly kits before, and then they start out as this egg, and you don't think that it's going to be anything wonderful, and then they're the caterpillar, and then it goes through the chrysalis and other stages, and then eventually it just transforms into this beautiful butterfly that goes out and flies and helps other people. And I can compare that to starting out as this, little egg that no one thought, and being that caterpillar, and then transforming into a butterfly. And now I get that chance to go out there and help other people.
See, I love it, Michelle. I love that you're using the butterfly as a symbol, as an example for you, and for the people that you're helping as well. So a little bit about the book then. What do you have a date in mind when the book will be ready? Is
it's still in the very beginning stages. I'm doing a little bit of writing every day with that. I'm not sure when it will be ready, but we're just working on that, and going into the blog and doing a lot of that too.
So before we go, Michelle, can you please, when the book is ready, or close to being ready, would you please come back?
Oh, I would love to.
And talk about the book, because I would love to help promote the book for you and get people to know about the book, because I think what you're doing is amazing. So just kind of keep us in mind.
Definitely.
Okay, down the road.
Sure.
I would love to do that. And then so we're going to be promoting your blog and your journey as well. So we'll put links in the show notes so people can just click on it and go right to your blog. But can you tell people what is the best way for people to connect with you?
People can connect with me. My email is msteiner441@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook. Instagram's another one, Steiner7250. And Michelle's Mission .blog is also a great way to connect with me as well.
Awesome. So if somebody wanted to reach out and leave a comment, ask you a question, you'd be willing to speak to people, definitely. Email and stuff. That's great. That's really, really great. And so how often do you publish your blog?
I try to get something out about every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's once a week, but usually about every 2 weeks we try to get a blog out. And I do add things. I'll add podcasts that I've been on to that as well. Or I'll add sometimes pictures, or if I got an article published somewhere else, sometimes I'll put that on there too.
Okay, Michelle, we've talked about so many great things. You're a wonderful guest, by the way. I'm so happy to have you on. Is there anything we haven't talked about, Michelle, before we close, that you feel you'd like to share with people that are listening, that are maybe struggling, or know somebody is struggling with a disability? What can we share with them?
I would say if someone is struggling with having a disability, it's really important that you find other people that share that. It's a little easier now than whenever I was younger. We have there's lots of groups online that can connect people, and I think that's really important. Somebody's struggling, and just to do what is the thing to do. What are the recommendations? But what works for you? I think that's the big thing.
Excellent. So anyone listening to this, and this podcast, we're so happy to have great guests. If you know someone in your life, in your circle of friends and family, that this podcast would help, I hope that you would share this out to them and support Michelle in her blog and in writing her book, and reach out and say thank you to Michelle for her time. So if you're listening to this, and like I said, you relate, there's something about this that speaks to you, please share this podcast out with somebody so that they can also interact with Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, so much for being part of our podcast. And again, we want you back again, all right?
Yes, definitely.
100%, 100%.
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Jump over to livingthenextchapter.com, our website and you will see a spot where you can leave a voice message. We'd love to hear your feedback. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to hear from you. So if you want your voice on this podcast, yes, that's possible. Go to livingthenextchapter.com. Click the little microphone icon. Leave a voice message. And we'll insert your message into the podcast. Tell us where you're listening from. Tell us your favorite guest. Maybe there's a guest we should have on the podcast. Maybe you should be our next guest. Leave us a message at livingthenextchapter.com. Again, thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast episode with one person. That's all we're asking. Meet you over there at livingthenextchapter.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Love to hear from you. Until the next episode, it's coming up right away. Be sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Thank you for supporting our guests. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.